Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanashari Yamuna Tira Vanashari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Brahmā Saparvajgacharya Ashtadurshata Shishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the sum of devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the sum of devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the sum of devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, texts 39 through 41 I'm going through. Got it? Itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhyaḥ eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ īśvaraḥ itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ itihāsa, histories, Purāṇāni, the Purāṇas, supplementary Vedas, pañcamam, the fifth, vedam, the Vedic literature, īśvaraḥ, the Lord, sarvebhyaḥ, altogether, eva, certainly, vaktrebhyaḥ, from his mouths, sasṛje, created, sarva, all around, darśanaḥ, one who can see all time. Translation Purport by His Divine Grace īśvaraḥ. Prabhupada. Therein he created the fifth Veda, the Purāṇas and the histories, from all his mouths, since he could see the past, present, and future. There are histories of particular countries and nations, and of the world, but the Purāṇas are the histories of the universe, not only in one millennium, but in many kalpas. Brahmā has knowledge of those historical facts, and therefore all the Purāṇas are histories. As originally composed by Brahmā, they are part of the Vedas and are called the fifth Veda. Om Ajnana-timirandhasya Gananjana-shalakaya Chakshura Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Buddhili Swayam Rupakada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparakamalam Shri Guru Nivaishnavamishta Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamishta He Krishna Kuruna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kantatano Stute Tap Tap Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranama Mihire Priye Vansha Kapatu Visha Kripasandu Bhiyavachapati Tanam Bhavnebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaha Putarishmati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaha Putarishmati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namane Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Prasharane Nirvishesha Shunyavari Pashkati Drishitarane. I'll cover the other verses later. I'll just speak point by point as the other verse goes on to a completely different topic. Itihāsa-purāṇāni pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ sarvebhya eva vaktrebhyaḥ sasṛje sarva-darśanaḥ. He created the fifth Veda, the Purāṇas and the histories from all his mouths, since he could see all the past, present, and future. So, Brahmā yesterday, I'll just read the previous two verses for the translation. Beginning from the front face of Brahmā, gradually the four Vedas, Rik, Yajura, Sama, and Atharva, gradually became manifest. Thereafter the Vedic hymns, which had not been pronounced before, priestly rituals, the subject matter of recitation, and the transcendental activities were all established one after another. There's technical words here, stuti, stomam, etc., like that. And then he also created the medical science, military art, musical art, and architectural science, all from the Vedas. They all emanated one after another, beginning from the front face. Then he created the fifth Veda, the Purāṇas and the histories, from all his mouth, since he could see all the past, present, and future. So, Brahmā is not necessarily, of course the word create is here, but it's not necessarily create. Sasṛje, sometimes it's translated like that, but it's more of a manifestation, you could say like that, because the Vedas aren't created, they're eternal. The fifth Veda is, or just like it said before, the four Vedas manifest, so it's to be taken in that sense, because the itihāsa-purāṇāni are also eternal. They may manifest at a certain point in time, but they're eternal spiritual literatures, just as, for instance, Bhagavatam, which is a Purāṇa, is. So we were hearing yesterday about different, or I guess yesterday was Sunday, so some days ago, military, art, science, etc., these minor points of Upapurāṇa, Upaveda, also these minor things of Vedic, they're minor sciences in Vedic literature, and then again, here in the word for word is explained supplementary Vedas, the Purāṇas. Itihāsas are histories. Purāṇas are also histories. Purāṇa means old. It's ancient is a better word, actually. So it gives the histories, not just of this kalpa. Srila Prabhupada writes of particular countries. Each country has its own history. Some are more recent than others. America has a history of some 300 years or something like that. Yeah, I guess now. And almost. And then Europe, if you look at Europe, has a much older history. The cities and towns are much older there. There's histories of wars, of rulers going back way further than America. And then you go to, say, Mesopotamia or India, you see histories stretching back even further than that. So each particular place has a certain recorded history. But the Purāṇas are histories not just of a particular nation, rather they're histories of the whole universe. And as explained here, not just in one kalpa, but many kalpas. So sometimes there's contradictions between the Purāṇas because it's relating different kalpas. It's not necessarily, I think it's stated in the Bhagavatam as well, maybe near the end. Things are not presented in a systematic things are presented systematically for spiritual elevation, but it's not like a history book. If you study a history book that begins with the Greeks, typically, although it goes back further than that, they begin with the Greeks, then you go to the Romans, and then they skip a whole bunch of stuff, and then they go to the Renaissance. So it's not like that, where you have just a progression of years. In the Bhagavatam, for instance, we were hearing about the creation of Brahmā. Well, first, from the beginning, actually, for the Bhagavatam, is out of order because it talks about the battle of Kurukshetra, the aftermath of that, practically. Then it goes back to the creation of the history of the universe. And then there's a little of chronology in the fact that it traces dynasties, but different devotees, different individuals that are talked about, they live longer than others, so it's not exactly chronological like that. It jumps around quite a lot. And then even within, just like in the 7th canto, for instance, is tracing some dynasties being traced there. And then suddenly, it gives the history of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad Maharaj, which are from Satya Yuga. So it jumps around quite a lot, and there's stories within stories. Purāṇas are stories. Mainly stories are found in the Purāṇas because they're itihāsa as well. Itihāsa is history. We also take that as history. Itihāsas are two. Mahabharata, which is the history or the story, you could take it, of the Pandavas, and also the Ramayana, which is the story of Lord Ram. Sita Devi as well, also they're interlinked. So there's the Purāṇas as well that contain, even these two stories, there's mention of the Mahabharata, for instance. The events of the Mahabharata that's explained in the first, or the aftermath of it, of the battle, at least, is explained in the first canto of the Bhagavatam. Ramayana is also explained in a nutshell form in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam. And also Lord Ramachandra's pastimes are summarized elsewhere, just like you see in the 1st canto, 3rd chapter, scheduled incarnations. Elsewhere, I think somewhere 2.7, Lord Ram's pastimes are also mentioned, summed up there. So the Purāṇas also give summations of what happens in the itihāsas. Therefore, you find commentaries sometimes referencing between one another, explaining some things more. Some things in the Purāṇas, you'll find details in the Purāṇas which are not in the itihāsas. Or sometimes you'll find differences in what the Purāṇas relate compared to what the itihāsas relate. So why is that? Same thing. It's a difference of kalpa. In each kalpa, pastimes are enacted. The Supreme Lord enacts different pastimes. So it's not the same time every time. Just like we'll hear in the next chapter, the appearance of the Lord of Varaha. So there is a white Varaha, and what's the other color? Red? Okay, I thought it was red, but somebody pointed out something recently to me. Yeah. Anyway, there's two Varahas, which are, I think it's white and red, Sometimes they depict them in a different color in the Bhagavatam paintings, but white and red. So it's not that two Varahas came at once. Rather, it's narrating the events of two different kalpas. Jiva Goswami explains that location. Similarly, even within the same Purāṇa, there's differences. Between Purāṇas, there's differences. Even between the Purāṇas, they're divided into three. There's Sattvik, Rajasic, and Tamasic Purāṇas. Even between the Sattvik Purāṇas, you find differences. Nrsimha Purāṇa, for instance, how it narrates. In the Bhagavatam, we all know that story. Lord Nrsimha appears out of a pillar. In the Nrsimha Purāṇa, is narrated that Lord Nrsimha basically walked into the city and killed Hiranyakashipu. Among different other variations, you'll find differences in Vishnu Purāṇa. There's extensive narrations of probably the second most. Bhagavata Purāṇa is famous for narrating the life of Krishna. Is known for that. If you look at the Bhagavata Purāṇa, Srimad Bhagavatam, if you analyze its contents, actually, something like a fourth or a fifth of the book is the 10th canto. It doesn't look like it to us because we have the commentary, and our commentary on the 10th canto isn't so big. Still, the 10th canto is pretty big. It's 4 volumes. It's bigger than any of the other volumes. But if you take just the verses in the Bhagavatam, the 10th canto comprises much of the book. It talks mainly about Krishna. And even in different places in the Bhagavatam, first canto is talking mainly about Krishna up until the end when it talks about different topics. So Bhagavatam mainly deals with Krishna. Vishnu Purāṇa also deals with different things, but there is a canto there specifically, a fourth or something like that. It also gives many different stories of Krishna. It relates pastimes of Krishna. And there's different details given there. If you see the commentaries by our acharyas, the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, they will reference Vishnu Purāṇa and other Purāṇas giving details to Krishna's pastimes. So Purāṇas different Purāṇas, they provide details into pastimes. Srimad Bhagavatam stands supreme among them because it's Amala Purāṇa, it's the spotless Purāṇa. Even among those Sattvik Purāṇas, Srimad Bhagavatam is completely pure. There's no tinge. Other Purāṇas you see, for instance, you take the Tamasic Purāṇas, sometimes it's described in some places, for instance, the Shiva Supreme, Durga Supreme, like that, Ganesha Supreme, etc., like this. Or they'll have a mix of the two. Even among the Sattvik Purāṇas, sometimes it's not so, sometimes there's glorification of both. Even among the Sattvik Purāṇas. For example, take the Padma Purāṇa. In the Padma Purāṇa, you see simultaneous glorification. Padma Purāṇa, there's an emphasis on the equality of course, it holds Vishnu as supreme, but you see that it stresses sometimes that Vishnu and Shiva, or non-different, are also equal like that. And just like, for example, our godbrother, most of our godbrothers, has pointed this out to me. In the Nama Parad, you have different things, many different Shiva Nama Mahatmya. You can take it, auspicious name of Lord Vishnu. You can also take it, the name of Lord Shiva. This comes from the Padma Purāṇa, these verses that we chant Nama Parad. Another thing, what is that? Abhinam? How does that go? Abhinam? It's the second. No. It's in the Nama Parads. It's the second offense. Shivasya Shri Vishnu Iha Gunanama Adi Sakalam Diyabhinam Pashit Sakari Hari Nama. What is that? Yeah. So you could take it 2 ways. That you could take it from the auspicious name, Shiva, the auspicious name of Lord Vishnu, one who thinks there's a difference between Vishnu and his name, he's an offender. You could also, if you're a Shaivite, you could interpret it that Shivasya of Shiva, Sri Vishnu and Vishnu, one who sees a difference between Shiva and Vishnu is an offender to, and you could take the whole list actually as offenses to the name of Lord Shiva if you so desired. Of course, we understand it, through our acharyas, it's explained in Hari Bhakti-Vilas and elsewhere, but if you don't have the proper understanding, for instance, the Padma Purāṇa doesn't always highlight the supreme of specifically Krishna on this point of Krishna. But the Bhagavad Purāṇa is unique and it stands among all of them in that of course, all the Vedas glorify Krishna in every syllable, but the Bhagavad Purāṇa makes things very, very clear from the very beginning that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that its topic is Krishna. Even when it's describing other topics, it's to, as that verse says in the second canto, other topics are described to isolate the summum bonum, the highest topic, which is Krishna. So the Bhagavad Purāṇa specifically deals with Krishna, therefore it's considered supreme among all other Purāṇas. The itihāsas also deal directly with the Supreme Lord, actually the Mahabharata deals more with the Pandavas than it does Krishna himself. Krishna is almost like a side character at some points if you read the Mahabharata. Therefore, Vyasadeva was upset, or he was despondent, even though he wrote the Mahabharata, as we've heard. He was despondent because he hadn't clearly described the glories of Krishna. Even he had written all the other Purāṇas at that point. It was only until he authored the Bhagavatam, or wrote down the Bhagavatam, that he actually became satisfied. Then you have, so the Mahabharata is there, describes, you get details of the life of Krishna, the Pandavas specifically. And the Ramayana also we're quite familiar with, because we have this book, many devotees have read it, The Life of Lord Ramachandra. So these two, as well as the Purāṇas, it's described here very significantly. Itihāsa-purāṇāni, pañcamam vedam īśvaraḥ, sarvebhya vaktrebhyaḥ, sasṛje. He created the 5th Vedas from his mouth. What were those 5th Vedas? Itihāsas and the Purāṇas. You could say this is biased because a Purāṇa is giving authority to, the Bhagavatam is giving Shastak authority to its own self. You could say that's biased, but it's not just the Bhagavatam. There's a famous verse in the Chandogya Upanishad, itihāsa-purāṇānam pañcamam vedanam, that the Shruti itself is saying this. The Vedas themselves state that itihāsas and the Purāṇas, they're the 5th Veda. Of course, people like to quote, among Mayavadis, you see they place emphasis on 10 so-called principal Upanishads, although it's sort of arbitrary. But even this Chandogya Upanishad, which is a principal Upanishad, it states that the itihāsas of the Purāṇas constitute the 5th Veda. So it's its authority is equal to that of the Shruti. There's no difference. The authority of the Vedas and the authority of the Purāṇas and the itihāsas are all the same. There's not a degradation. There's not a gradation as Shankaracharya explains it as, and as unfortunately common people think. So this is a very significant point, that this is the Veda. But this, specifically the Purāṇas and the itihāsas especially, they are compiled in such a way such that the common people can benefit from them. Whereas the 4 Vedas themselves, the traditional 4 Vedas, Rig, Samar, Yajur, Atharva, they require certain qualification to be able to read, chant, study, etc. like that. Brahmanas, or second, typically it's characteristic of Brahmanas to do so, but you must have been initiated into the Vedic line of Diksha, etc. like that, having undergone Upananya Samskara, like that. Otherwise, your chanting of the Vedas or study of the Vedas has an opposite effect, actually. You don't get elevated by that, you become degraded by that. So, for those who are not initiated, it's not allowed to chant Vedic mantras, among other things. Otherwise, it has an opposite effect. As we've seen in Bhagavatam, somebody was relating recently the example of some asura that was, even if you just take it Vritrasura, which is famous, how he was summoned, there was improper chanting of the meter. So what to speak of just improper chanting of the meter if you don't have the first qualification to enter into the chanting of the Vedas themselves? It's going to have a bad effect, if anything at all. So But these Vedas, the fifth Veda is special because the common man can benefit from them. The Mahabharata, for instance, was compiled specifically with the intent that Stri Shudra Dvijabandhunam, that those who are fallen Brahmanas, who are born in Brahminical families and have fallen from that status, women and Shudras, who traditionally aren't allowed to come to study the Vedas, they may hear some corollary explanations or some commentaries from Brahmanas. They're not completely debarred from Vedic knowledge, but directly they don't approach it like that. But the Purāṇas and the itihāsas especially compiled for the common class of people as Krishna's mercy. Otherwise, the Vedas are very difficult to understand. Their language is also quite cryptic. Not that the language itself, but it's just, if you take, for example, the Rig Veda, there's many different hymns and stotras, the demigods. Of course, they're all glorifying Vishnu at the end of the day. But it does so, and it's difficult to understand that. And even if you take the philosophical portions of the Vedas, the Upanishads, it's quite difficult to understand what's going on there. It uses very complex language. Some places simplistic, but it's quite complex. Even if you look at the Upanishad, which we were chanting some years ago, often the Sanskrit is repeated under different circumstances. It refers more to quite vague things that just like there are two paths of knowledge, etc. like that. What does it exactly mean? It doesn't go into detail. Commentaries are required. Therefore, Brahmanas would... It's not just study of the Vedas. Simultaneously in studying the Vedas, Upanishads, etc. like that, you also study the commentaries. You don't go to things directly. Even the Purāṇas, actually, things are explained by an acharya. The Purāṇas, they were narrated even, for example, here, you have the example, Sutta Goswami is narrating the Purāṇas, Shukadeva Goswami is narrating the Purāṇas, and even Maharaj Parikshit, who's qualified, he has difficulty understanding. Or he's a pure devotee, but for the common man, he puts on such an example. So he asks for explanations at some points. Why did this happen? Can you please explain more about this? Etc. like this. So the Purāṇas, traditionally, they're explained, they're spoken by, there's a whole subcaste of Brahmanas who speak them, actually. Puranika, something like that, I forget. Sutta Goswami is of that caste. Ramaharshana Sutta is also of that caste. Sutta caste, actually, they call it that, is the lower class of Brahmanas. So they speak the Purāṇas, they explain the Purāṇas as well. So same thing, in studying the Upanishads, etc. like that, you would study commentaries. It's not that you take it directly, which then gives the meaning of them. So, I could speak more on that. Maybe I'll speak a little more, but I want to cover the other verses. So the four Vedas, we're familiar. Rig, Sama, Yajur, Atharva Veda. Rig Veda mainly deals with hymns to different demigods, ultimately all glorifying Vishnu, because the names of demigods, Indra, for instance, is a name of Vishnu. Agni is also a name of Vishnu. So it mainly constitutes prayers. The Samaveda is a musical Veda. You can hear it if you have heard its chanting. It's very beautiful. It's very complex as well. Mainly deals with melodic verses like that. Compositions. Also some science of music is also there. Yajur Veda mainly deals with, as its name suggests, sacrifices, how to conduct sacrifices, the role of priests in a sacrifice, the mantras to be chanted during the sacrifices, etc. like that. The mantras, for example, we chant during our sacrifices that come from the Yajur Veda. And Atharva Veda, which is a little more obscure, deals with, sometimes Atharva Veda is thrown in with the Yajur Veda, and some places in the Bhagavatam, sometimes you see Chatur Veda, sometimes you see Tri Veda. So Atharva Veda, it deals with more, you could say, like occult things, although that's kind of a poor word. It deals with things like mantras, chanting, mantras for cursing people, things to do for health, how to different diseases and how to cure those diseases, both by practical means and also by means of mantra, so healing like that. So Atharva Veda mainly deals with these sorts of more worldly, practical things. And then the fifth Veda I've explained. So, yeah, that's this verse. I'll go on to the next verse now, if somebody is still here. Yeah. Shodashyokto purva vaktrat purishi agnishtuta vyata aptoryamata tiratrocha vajapeyam sagosavam. All the different types of fire sacrifices, Shodashi, Ukta, Purishi, Agnistoma, Aptoryama, Atiratra, Vajapaya, and Gosava, became manifest from the eastern mouth of Brahmā. Then, Vidyadanam tapasatyam dharmasyati padanicha ashramams chayita sankyam asṛjat sahavrittibihi. Education, charity, and penance and truth are said to be the four legs of religion. And to learn this, there are four orders of life with different classifications of castes according to vocation. Brahmā created all these in systematic order. Purport: the nucleus of the four social orders, brahmacharya or student life, grihastha or household family life, vanaprastha or retired life for practicing penance, and sannyas, the renounced life for preaching the truth. Hang on. Is it? Okay, yeah, it's explained later. Sorry. I thought there was a difference between this and what I read online. Preaching the truth is the four legs of religion. The vocational divisions are the Brahmanas, or the intelligent class, the Kshatriyas, or the administrative class, the Vaishyas, or the mercantile productive class, and the Shudras, or general laborer class who have no specific qualifications. All were systematically planned and created by Brahmā, by Krishna, ultimately, of course, for the regular promotion of self-realization. Student life is meant for acquiring the best education. Household life is meant for gratifying the senses, provided it is performed with a charitable disposition of mind. Retirement from household life is meant for penance, and advancement in spiritual life and renounced life is meant for preaching the absolute truth to the people in general. The combined actions of all members of a society make the whole situation favorable for the upliftment of the mission of human life. The beginning of the social institution is based on education meant for purifying the animal propensities of the human being. The highest purificatory process is knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the purest of the pure. So for those who are familiar with Bhagavatam, you can go to the translation again. There's a different rendition here. Education, the four legs of religion, education, charity, penance, and truth are said to be the four legs of religion. Elsewhere, first canto, we have that verse, Kriti pravartate dharmash taturpatajjaner dritaha satyam daya tapo danam iti para vibornripa. Shukadeva Goswami explains four legs of religion as satyam daya tapo danam, that truth, we have here the same thing, austerity, tapaha, same thing here. Charity, the same thing comes here, danam. And then he gives daya, mercy. Here we have education. So what does it mean? This is explained, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains, I'll try and pull it up, because I just want to read his purport entirely, if it's not too small. Okay. It's a little small. Regarding purity, this is his translation by Bhanu Swami. Regarding purity, the Yajna Valkla Smriti says, Kshetra Gyasya īśvaraḥ Jnanad Vishuddhi Paramahmata. From knowledge of the Supreme Lord arises the highest purity for the jiva. Thus, knowledge can be equated with purity. So that's what's going on here. Knowledge is being equated with purity. Sometimes we hear that mercy is destroyed by intoxication. What does that exactly mean? From one angle you can understand, another angle may be a little confusing, but purity is also equated with mercy, as is being done here. So that's how intoxication destroys purity. You can also understand, that's readily understandable. You can also understand how intoxication can destroy knowledge. That's very obvious. Somebody gets intoxicated, they lose all their intelligence. And if doing it for long periods of time, they become, if they're unfortunate, that becomes their constitutional nature. You see alcoholics, they're chronically, it affects the intelligence. The mind becomes irreparably damaged. Similarly, for those who are taking other intoxicants. So, intoxication also destroys education. And they're all being equated here. So, in brief, this knowledge is being equated with the, mercy that's described before. So what happens to mercy? Where does mercy go? Where he explains later that charity can be equated with mercy, since it says, Bhuta bhaya pradhanasya kalam narhati shodashim. Those engaging in past activities do not achieve 1/16 of the results of the person who bestows in charity fearlessness to living beings. Thus, there is no contradiction in the previous statement, this verse I just quoted from the first canto, in Satya Yoga, that Dharma constituted austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truth. So that's how the Acharya explains that verse here. And then Srila Prabhupada, he mentions this in the last line: the highest purificatory process is knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada, he talks about giving his own commentary. He talks about Varnashram Dharma in the Purport. He gives a nice synopsis of each ashram here. I quite liked it. The student life is meant for education. You see that brahmachari life, you get the best education. What is that best education? Obviously, Srila Prabhupada is referring here to spiritual education, which is Raja Vidya. It's the king of all education, but it's also the best situation for education. In terms of traditionally, young boys, there will be brahmacharyas from a young age. So in youth, you have a good opportunity for education. For those who are unfortunate like me, who miss such a good opportunity in youth, Brahmacharya ashram also gives you a good opportunity for re-education, learning everything, again, beginning with how to properly pass stool and clean oneself for those who are coming from an uncultured background. So the Brahmacharya ashram, it gives you a good opportunity for education. And that education can go on and on and on. And Krishna consciousness is not that, as sometimes some people think, you get a thread, and once you become Brahmanically initiated, your education stops, you don't have to learn anything more. Krishna consciousness is an ongoing process of education. And especially in the Brahmacharya ashram, the education, it's a good situation for education. Whereas it's not so in the Grahastha ashram. For those, it doesn't happen so much in America, but so I've heard in Europe, many people come to Krishna consciousness already married. Older like that, and you see there's older devotees in Europe. And they don't have the opportunity to take the advantage of the education that's offered in the Brahmacharya ashram, or Brahmacharya ashram we also have, in the sense of two things. One, scriptural education, just flat out, it's a known fact, Grahasthas often don't have time to read Srila Prabhupada's books. Second thing, to get practical training and practical devotional service in terms of how to do certain services, in terms of etiquette, Vaishnava etiquette, cultural points as well. Brahmacharya ashram is a very good medium for understanding these things and for learning these things. In the Brahmacharya ashram, you see, it's people often ask, how were you able to read today? Or if you don't read someday, people complain about it. I didn't even get to read today. It's it's expected in the Brahmacharya ashram or Brahmacharya ashram, there's time for reading. Whereas in the Grahastha ashram, of course, it's expected that every devotee read Srila Prabhupada's books, but just by way the problems of modern civilization, of Grahastha life in modern civilization, it's understood that taking that education, there's more difficulty in taking that education. You should have not that you stop reading Srila Prabhupada's books, of course, but it's expected that when one enters into Grahastha life, he's had his education, and that is what he had. Of course, education goes on, as I said, but largely there's a basis that's already there. Not that one has to learn basics upon entering into the Grahastha ashram. It's something like learning an instrument. For some time, there's time spent learning the basics of an instrument, and then you know how to play it. Of course, there's always room for improvement, infinitely so. Even somebody may be completely expert at an instrument, still they can get better because there's no limit to it. So similarly, Grahastha ashram, entering into it, there should be some basis of training, ideally. Of course, Kali Yuga, there's faults here, there, and everywhere, but this is the best case situation. So Brahmacharya ashram is a good situation for education, Srila Prabhupada is writing here. Household family life is meant for gratifying the senses. That's a somewhat humorous way of summing it up. It's true, household life is meant for gratifying the senses. Otherwise, stay brahmachari. Of course, there's different situations. Life is complex. It's not just as complex as staying brahmachari. Just like you see Parivrata, he was ordered to marry. He didn't want to do so, but he was forced to do so, or he was coaxed into doing so. So life is complicated, and different people may enter Grahastha ashram for different means, but primarily the Vedic situation is such that the Grahastha ashram is there mainly for allowing one a degree of sense gratification, which isn't offered in the other ashrams, either brahmachari, vanaprastha, or sannyas. So, and then here, Srila Prabhupada also mentions in passing that provided it is performed with a charitable disposition of mind. One thing about the Grihastha ashram is that the householder is expected to give in charity. As Srila Prabhupada would often emphasize to his own householders to give, following the example of Rupa Goswami, to give 50%, if not that, at least give something. It is incumbent upon the householders to support the renunciates. So the householders give in charity like that to temples, to Brahmanas, etc. like this is a major function of Grihastha life. Grihasthas are the only ones earning an income in society, so they're the ones that have to support spiritual activities, financially so, for others in a practical means. Of course, Krishna takes care ultimately, but it's the duty of Grihasthas like that. Vanaprastha life, or here, what is that? Retirement, he translates. Retirement from household life is meant for penance. Tapasya, traditionally entering the forest, etc. like that. We don't have that nowadays, but we hardly have much of a Vanaprastha ashram, but if something is manifesting now, people are getting something together. Vanaprastha life is meant for penance. Whereas in Grihastha life, one lives within the house in a comfortable situation surrounded by family, and the focus is on raising a Krishna-conscious family, above and beyond all. The focus of the Vanaprastha ashram is not so much family, it's detaching oneself from one's family situation and specifically focusing on spiritual activities, honing in on spiritual activities and preparing oneself to either go to the next stage for those few who do, or for the moment of death. If you take it from age of 50, which is when Vanaprastha is meant to start, around that age, also from the age of 50, you can die at any time, practically. Maybe not 50, but definitely once you get into 60s, death is not very surprising if somebody dies at the age of 60 or so. So with Vanaprastha life comes with the possibility of leaving one's body at any moment. So it's meant to prepare oneself for leaving one's body. Sannyas ultimately is meant for that as well, but sannyas has another purpose we'll talk about. So yeah, Vanaprastha life is meant for, it's not so much relevant for all of us here, so I won't speak on it so much, but you should see is an important point to those who have passed the age of 50, 60, especially people have children at different times. Of course, some people have children late. It's not that you can just abandon your, whatever, maybe a little extreme, but like 10-year-old child or something, if you have a kid that late, happens sometimes. You should at least see that he's taken care of, the child is taken care of. But it's not that you grip on to householder life, you stay in the house perpetually. Otherwise, if you stay in the house perpetually, you may take birth in that house perpetually. Could happen. So it's meant for detaching oneself from the situation. And it's a gradual thing too, of course. I was thinking about this recently, that it's quite hard to enter the Vanaprastha ashram for different reasons, societal reasons. But yeah, it's an ideal that we should strive to for those. There should be my Guru Maharaj, he says something in a lecture that one should enter into the Grihastha ashram and not become situated within it. It's Grihastha ashram, not just Grihastha. If you're Grihastha, that means you're stuck there, you're fixed there, you're sta. Just like we have this word kutastha in the Bhagavad Gita, it means it's fixed. So sometimes people enter the Grihastha ashram and they just stay there. Grihastha ashram, you're meant to come out the other side. Of course, not prematurely so, but just covering different points. And then the sannyasa ashram, for those who take to it, is not mandatory. It's not that everybody's fit for sannyasa either. That's another thing. That is meant for renunciation. Typically, we think of sannyasa as renunciation, even more renounced than the Vanaprasthas. But here, specifically, is meant for preaching the absolute truth to the people in general. Renunciation, etc., like that, it's more, of course, that's inseparable, but the principal activity of a sannyasi is preaching among the people in general. The duty of a sannyasi is to contribute something. Srila Prabhupada wrote in one place, specifically some literary contribution, some book like that, for the people in general, for the benefit of the people in general. You see, interesting anecdote that came to my mind. Achyutananda Prabhu, who was formerly Maharaj at the time, he took that instruction, he wrote the songbook, the songs of the Vaishnava Acharyas, which we use today even still. So which mainly devotees in ISKCON, they know songs out of that book and they don't know so many songs outside of that book. And it's all because he wrote that book actually. So sannyasis are meant for enlightening and benefiting the people in general. Best way to do so is by books, especially in the modern age, but also traveling, preaching, etc. like that. sannyasis, by their preaching, by their practical preaching, they have a very great effect upon people. Maybe not so much here in America, in India more so, but even among devotees, it's very inspiring to see sannyasis preach. Having sannyasis, especially among brahmacharis, is very inspiring. I remember when before we came here, we were in New York, we had Kavi Chandra Maharaj. He stayed with us for like a month or two, something like that. It seemed like an eternity. And he stayed in the ashram. And he basically just like lived with like any other brahmachari. It was very inspiring. He would come on Sankirtan, the same timings that all the other brahmacharis follow for their schedule in terms of coming on Sankirtan, taking breakfast, taking everything. He followed it like a brahmachari. It's almost like he forgot he's a sannyasi just by his humble behavior. So sannyasis inspire others within society by their example as well. They're the gurus of society. They set the example for others, and specifically in this situation, he was certainly doing so. And then we have the vocational division. Srila Prabhupada gives in brief the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. I was going to cover those, specifically the Brahmana, but maybe not, because anyway, we've covered it so many times. I'm just working on an essay right now that deals with Brahmanas, so I just thought to mention some things, qualities of Brahmanas. But we should, whatever vocational division we're occupying, ultimately, of course, a Vaishnava is not exactly a Brahmana any more than he's a Vaishya, Shudra, or even a sannyasi, grahasta, etc. like that, because there's designations, which we have to accept as long as we're in this material world. Vaishnavas accept these designations for the benefit of others. Srila Prabhupada will explain in his lectures. When Satyavrat Maharaj asked Srila Prabhupada, aren't Vaishnavas above all these varnashram divisions? Srila Prabhupada explained, yes, they're above them, and Bhaktisiddhanta said the same thing. But a Vaishnava accepts these positions to show the example, to show the way for others. Therefore, a Vaishnava may act in the role of a Vaishya, not that he's a Vaishya, but he acts as such and he accepts the work of a Vaishya to teach others so. And other things as well, like that. It's not that a Vaishnava who adopts the profession or the vocation of a Brahmana is more elevated than that of a Vaishya, or one who's engaging in Vaishya work. A Vaishnava is neither both. He can't be designated like that. So, just different points bringing out. And then Srila Prabhupada writes, I won't get so much into Varnashram because, anyway, I think there's a class tonight. I think they'll talk about that more. And that's regularly being discussed in the classes. One point I thought to mention here, the combined actions of all members of society make the whole situation favorable for the upliftment of the mission of human life. All the classes come together, all the varnas and all the ashrams, they come together and create a situation favorable for the upliftment of the mission of human life. What is that favorable situation? How is that done? Specifically through yajna. All varnas and all ashramas, they're united through the process of yajna. Of course, brahmanas may be the ones doing the yajna. Specifically, yajna stereotypically, refers to fire sacrifice, as in the verse previously, all the different varieties of fire sacrifices we're hearing about. Yajna, there's different types of yajna. There's sacrifice of knowledge, as we're here in the Bhagavad Gita. There's also Sankirtan yajna. So through yajna, all varnas, the point of what every varna and ashram is doing is to engage in yajna and to induce other people to engage in yajna. So the varnashram system finds its perfection when yajna is being executed. If there is no yajna, the varnashram system is useless. This is why the sages killed Vena when he stopped the yajna. Stopped yajnas when in his kingdom, because if there's no yajna, there's an auspicious situation that's being meant here for the upliftment of the mission of the human life. The mission of the human form of life is not being fulfilled if there's no sacrifice. Just simply put. Otherwise, the varnashram dharma system is just sleeping, eating, mating, and defending in a varnashrama way. It doesn't actually elevate you if there's no yajna there. Otherwise, and the whole system is designed around that. It's based upon education meant for purifying the animal propensities of the human being. If one just goes on eating, sleeping, mating, and defending the animal propensities, and if they're not purified through sacrifice, then you can go on executing your varnashram duties, perfectly so, for millions of births, but you won't get elevation from that if you're not engaging in sacrifice. So, yeah, that's kind of all the points. I could talk longer on Varnashram divisions, but it's been hammered in so many other classes. I'm not specifically prepared for that, so I won't do that. So I can end it here for any comments or questions. Anybody may have? Yes?
I forget the name of this Prabhupada disciple who was just here. Does it Yamya?
Bahushira Prabhu?
Bahushira Prabhu,
Yeah.
When he was giving class, he said that in the Vishnu Purāṇa, Lord Varaha is black. Right?
Yeah. Actually, I was about to say that, but then Vishnu Chittapur was saying red, so I just accepted. I don't know often. I've heard that too, actually.
I did a quick chat GPT. So in the Valmiki Ramayana, this is according to chat GPT, but anyways, in the Valmiki Ramayana he's described as red. In the Bhagavad Purāṇa he's described as white. And in the Vishnu Purāṇa he's described as black. Then it even goes on to say a little more, but it seems like according to Yuga.
According to Yuga, yeah, the difference could be there.
Yeah. And then I had a question.
Yeah, sure.
I think Chardesh was talking about it with me. But, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken not just to Arjuna, but to the sun god.
Yeah.
The same knowledge is spoken in a different context. The same knowledge given in a different story.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious how the Bhagavatam goes because, anyways, I'll just say what I assume, and then you can correct me.
Yeah.
The proper understanding. But our Lord Brahmā, who's currently Lord Brahmā, was given the Bhagavatam as we have it now.
Yeah.
And this was at the beginning of
Creation,
this
basically,
creation
yeah.
of this universe. And the stories therein are from previous universes? Or how does that work? Because otherwise it's like Brahma's hearing about the future.
Well, specifically, if you look at how Srila Prabhupada explains, do you have more, or is that the? If you look how Srila Prabhupada explains, there's stories, but okay. So the Bhagavatam now, like for instance, we're hearing about how Brahmā created progeny, but the Bhagavatam is describing that, but the Bhagavatam Brahmā received, there was no progeny at that time. So what happened? The Bhagavatam expanded. Srila Prabhupada explains at one point that the Parampara expands the Bhagavatam, and Srila Prabhupada also says, you probably remember this purport. It says he's also expanding the Bhagavatam. That Brahmā was imparted the Bhagavatam in 4 verses, and even necessarily the knowledge that Brahmā received is not, of course, Bhagavatam is absolute, but things become manifest more and more from, for example, we don't have information of Brahmā having knowledge about the gopis of Vrindavan, Rasa Lila, etc., like that. That wasn't in the Bhagavatam that he had heard. That was expanded upon as the Bhagavatam was passed down. Just like even now, the Sanskrit verses which we have that were written by Vyasadeva, we have our own acharyas explaining more details within those verses, giving more insights as to what's happening. Of course, it's not a concoction, it's an expansion of the pastimes. So, Srila Prabhupada explains this in one place, that even Brahmā, he hadn't received the same grade of knowledge that, for instance, Uddhava Uddhava had, among others. So, in regards to that specific question, how is it that we're hearing about there's things in the Bhagavatam, there's stories that happen after the time of Lord Brahma's hearing? Well, those are added to the Bhagavatam later. Specifically by Vyasa, we could take it like that, or Shukadeva Goswami, one of the two, however it came like that. Even Sutta Goswami could have also expanded upon them. Yeah, that's one thing. You see, of course, traditionally so, those who would speak the Purāṇas, they will elaborate upon what's happening. Of course, these are like authoritative personalities, so they can do so, and what they say is a fact. But yeah, it was expanded afterwards. This is explained somewhere. I think we read it somewhere recently. Maybe my mind is tricking me. I think it's somewhere in the second canto, something like that. Maybe around the 4 verses, the Charta Shloka Bhagavatam, it's explained around there. But yeah, basically. So, it's okay? Anything else? Yeah. Another quick point is interesting. Even the Gita, what we have in the Gita is not necessarily... I've heard Gurumars explain this in the lecture. Gita is given to us in shloka form mainly. But is it that Krishna spoke shlokas to Arjuna on the back? Not necessarily so. What's written there is the realization of Vyasadeva. And it may not literally be like word for, of course, it's not different from Krishna. All these things are explained. But it's not that Krishna, for example, Bhagavad Gita, it's not that Krishna spoke the exact same shlokas to Vivasvan that he spoke to Arjuna. Similarly, there may be some difference in the shlokas, but the Gita is the Gita. So similarly, the Bhagavatam is... Bhagavatam is Bhagavatam, even though there may be differences in the shlokas, even different shlokas may be there, different shlokas may not be there. Hardly we won't find, for example, Arjuna or Krishna answering the question of how he had received, he had knowledge. What is that? Arjuna asks that Vivasvan is senior to you by birth, and then Krishna answers this doubt of Arjuna. So obviously Krishna wouldn't resolve the same doubt of Vivasvan. It doesn't make sense at all. So those verses that Krishna spoke, they're not going to be there in the Gita that he spoke to Vivasvan. Similarly, too, even what was necessarily compiled by Vyasadeva, it may not literally be Krishna's exact words. Gurumars explains this in one lecture around the 4th chapter where these points are brought out. So, of course, they're not different from Krishna, and they're authored by incarnation of Krishna Vyasadeva himself as well. So they're authoritative like that. But just some different points for consideration. Same thing with the Bhagavatam. Sometimes you hear here, Vyasadeva is just summarizing something, So same thing like that.
It's inconceivable how the translated literature can change yet stay
Yeah.
same complete.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what qualifies the Bhagavad Gita? Is it that there's briefly, karma yoga described, then Sankhya yoga, dhyana yoga, buddhi yoga?
Gita specifically, according to my knowledge, there's 5 topics of Gita that are explained there. I would say like that. Every time there's Gita, those 5 things are explained like that. And the Bhagavatam specifically, what qualifies Bhagavatam, well, the Lord is described in full, and also which definitely that's there in Chatra Shloki Bhagavatam, and also the Lord's devotees are also described, which that's also there in Chatra Shloki Bhagavatam. According to commentaries, they take it out like that. So both of these things are present in Bhagavatam as well. So
Bhagavatam's, the position of Bhagavatam is that it describes pure devotional service. It's only focused on
Krishna and Krishna's devotees. That's the special qualification of Bhagavatam. That's what Bhagavatam literally means, more or less. So, like that. Is something, Charan?
Yes. Prabhu? Hare Krishna? Prabhu? Yes. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if this was just mentioned, sorry, but you said how the Bhagavatam is spotless Purāṇa.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what is the story behind that, or why is it called that?
Why is it called that? Well, is there more to that, or is that? Okay, why is it called that? Is this mentioned in the 12th canto? Does anybody know offhand? You read the 12th canto recently? Does this come there? Amala Purāṇa? Purāṇam Amalam? No? But this exact Sanskrit, does it come there? Don't know? There is, in the 12th canto, there's different glorification of the Bhagavatam, but specifically this Purāṇam Amalam, it's written, I forget by who. It's written in the introduction to a commentary in the Bhagavatam by one devotee, I forget who. It's a little obscure commentary. It's in our verse books, it's quoted there. But specifically, we assign an importance because Lord Chaitanya, he quoted it like that. Why is it the Amala Purāṇa? Because as I explained a little bit recently, it focuses only on Krishna. For example, other Purāṇas, Padma Purāṇa, for instance, I was relating before. So Padma Purāṇa is Vaishnava Purāṇa, Sattvic Purāṇa, it glorifies even Krishna. You hear, there's descriptions of even Radharani within Padma Purāṇa. You see this cited in the 10th canto in our Acharya's commentaries. So how is it that Bhagavatam, which doesn't even speak about Radharani, is higher than Padma Purāṇa? Because Bhagavatam solely focuses, its only focus is on Krishna and Krishna's devotees. Padma Purāṇa, it goes on to different things. There's so many things in Padma Purāṇa. Even Vishnu Purāṇa, there's different things. And there's not a very clear, well-defined position that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the special qualification of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that it very clearly establishes Krishna as God, and Oh, this comes here? Yeah. Oh, it does come in the Bhagavatam. Yeah, the Bhagavatam itself says here, somebody just gave me, Srimad Bhagavatam Puranam Amalam Yad Vaishnavanam Priyam Yasmin Paramahamsamekam Amalam Gyanam Param Giyate Tatra Gyana Viraga Bhakti Sahitam Naishkarmyam Viskritam Tachrinvan Supatan Vicharana Paro Bhaktya Vimochin Naraha. The spotless Purana is most dear to the Vaishnavas because it describes the pure and supreme knowledge of the Paramahamsas, which is Krishna. This Bhagavatam reveals the means for becoming free from all material work, together with the process of transcendental knowledge, renunciation, and devotion. It continues on like that, but it specifically this, because it contains specific knowledge about Krishna. Other Puranas do too, but Bhagavatam specializes in it. That's the speciality of Bhagavatam. That's why it's completely pure. Whereas others, you see sometimes even Sattvic Purāṇas, sometimes there's glorification of different demigods. Sometimes it gets off into quite, not random topics, but just sort of tangential things, just as Mahabharata sometimes gets off into tangential stories, for instance. Purānas also do too, like that, different things, glorifications of different tirthas, etc., like that, glorification of different personalities, things like that. But Bhagavatam, everything that's within Bhagavatam, it's either it's about Krishna, or about Krishna's devotees, or about something dealing with Krishna. Just like you have the creation, it describes the creation in depth. Why? Because the creation has a direct link with the Krishna. That's explained in the Bhagavatam itself. The creation is Krishna's pastimes. Shukadeva Goswami explains that in his prayers. So everything deals with Krishna specifically. That's why that is considered the spotless Purana. Okay, he's not here, so I can't ask. Okay, so I'll just assume that was okay. So anything else? From them? You hear something? No? Resolved?
I had a question. I also had a comment about this before my question.
Sure.
I remember one Guru Maharaj's class, he mentions that in Mahabharata, Yudhishthira Maharaj says the most surprising thing is that even though people see that people are dying around them and going to the abode of Yamaraj day and night, but still they think that their chance will never come. And Yudhishthira Maharaj says that that's the most amazing thing that he finds. And Guru Maharaj says, even more amazing is that Prabhupada could give something as spotless as Bhagavatam, Amala Purana, to hippies in New York City. Mm-hmm. And still, uplift them, make them qualified to read Bhagavatam. No other Purana could have done it, Vedas couldn't have done it, Krishna Purana couldn't have done it. But Bhagavad Purana could do what the other Puranas couldn't do. So, mm-hmm. I mean, that's one thing. Guru Maharaj says that it's more amazing that Bhagavatam could uplift these fallen people also.
Yeah.
My question is...
One thing, just on the same topic, another point, how it's Amala Purana, is because it's meant for the Paramahamsas. Bhagavatam is completely transcendental. Of course, all Puranas are transcendental because they're the fifth Vedas, they're the breathing of Narayan in that sense, but the Puranas are, you could say, targeted at different people. Those in the mode of goodness, passion, ignorance. Even they may be worshipping Vishnu, the person in the mode of goodness, he worships Vishnu, but Bhagavatam specifically is meant for the Paramahamsas, those who are completely beyond the modes of material nature, whereas the Purāṇas are aimed at those who are within the modes of material nature. Bhagavatam is not. So, yeah, I just want to add that as well. So,
My question was, you mentioned that Purāṇas, they were spoken by Brahmanas of lower category.
yeah, Sutta caste, typically. Therefore, you see the example and why the sages became angry at that Romaharshana Sutta. In fact, when he insulted Lord Balaram because he didn't stand up, then immediately his lower birth was called into question. That like, oh, you like that. There's different gradations. Even that's a specific caste. There's different gradations of Brahmanas altogether. Those who study astrology are a little bit lower. The highest are those who study Shastra, etc., like that. Then you have those who conduct sacrifices. Those are also among the higher Brahmanas. There's so many, So yeah, I've heard this explained. So
I mean, side point was, Karna is called Sutaputra. He's carpenter caste.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Suta, they say that it's carpenter caste. Suta also means some Brahman caste also.
Could be different meaning of the same word. Could be there. I don't know exactly the details. I'm not so expert in all the castes. I also know Sutta sometimes refers to son. It could also be chariot driver, isn't it? Something like that. Am I wrong?
Suta, it can be chariot driver.
Yeah. So exactly what's going. I mean, definitely chariot drivers are not the same. I hardly expect the same caste constitutes those who speak the Purāṇas and also those who drive chariots. So it could be the same word that's used for a different caste. Could be such a thing. That's my philosophical speculation. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to make sense. So, okay?
One question, Prabhu.
Yeah.
I always have this confusion. Suta Goswami is the son of Romaharshan.
Yes.
Okay.
They elevated him to the seat after Romaharshan died. I think that's described in Bhagavatam. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, 12th canto is there, yeah.
I mean, Suta means like son.
Sutta means son. It could also refer to the caste itself. Could be. I don't exactly know what it means there in his name, but yeah. Yeah, it's very confusing. The castes are very confusing. When you go to caste and the jatis, it gets very confusing unless you know those things. I don't know those things because I'm not from India. Still, those things are there today. You have those who speak on the Purāṇas. You see, in the 12th canto, this is explained that Romaharshan Sutta, his caste is described, and those who, even Sutta Goswami is of the same caste, he's speaking on the Purāṇas, and there's also others, those who spoke in the Purāṇas. Even today, the caste is still there. They still speak in the Purāṇas today like that. So it's not something so far removed. It's not just something that's in the Shastra, but it's something very tangible too. So it's very complicated. The divisions of caste get very complicated. So, anything from the Mataji side? Yes.
So in the first verse, the term sasṛje, you were talking about how it's not applicable because the Vedas are eternal.
Well, I mean, not exactly. Yeah, it means in the sense of creation. Sometimes you see the same word that Krishna created sasṛje. It refers to creation specifically. Prabhupada translates like that. And I just don't want it to sound like I'm saying it's wrong, okay? I just mean specifically as being, just like sometimes Srila Prabhupada translates Krishna created the world, sometimes it's explained he manifested the world. So it's not that the Vedas were necessarily created at any point in time, because Prabhupada explains that elsewhere, so we have to take it in the sense of manifested, in other words. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that you were saying it was wrong. It just brought up a question for me about Krishna's pastimes, because they're also eternal. So when Krishna's pastimes happen here in this world, where this world becomes manifest and unmanifest, what happens to those places like Nishigapali or Ahobalam? What happens to those places when this world becomes unmanifested?
When this world becomes unmanifested, I think there's a description of this actually somewhere. I seem to at least have heard it. Well, just like if you take Vrindavan Dham within this world, it's it's a reflection, or it's the same Vrindavan Dham that's in the spiritual world. So you can't necessarily say like it's destroyed or anything. In one sense, it's destroyed in the sense that the material world gets destroyed. Definitely the material world gets destroyed. But what about those places that are spiritual within the material world? Then you could say they become vyakta avyakta. They're manifest, they become unmanifest. Just as Krishna comes to this world, he manifests his pastimes. So Krishna is non-different from his dham, etc. like that. His pastime places, they become manifest and they become unmanifest. I would explain like that. Rather than the gross material elements, which are definitely annihilated by the fire of destruction, among other things, the dhams are not necessarily like that. And even the dhams dhams means all pastime places, not just Mayapur, Vrindavan. They may become unmanifest even before, for example, the universe is destroyed. It could be such a situation. Just like we hear, or covered over, maybe a better word, but you could say, at least in English, unmanifest also like implies the same thing. But could be such a situation, but definitely they're not destroyed. It seems to me like, and I've heard descriptions as well, they become retracted like that. So.
And then with those places where they exist now, when it becomes unmanifested, would it be the same location when the yugas come back again?
Presumably so, because Vrindavan is always in the same pretty much area. So far I understand. According to, for example, we don't have descriptions of Vrindavan. Well, there are actually. Not exactly, anyway, not to get tangential, but we don't have descriptions of Vrindavan ever being in South India, for instance, to my knowledge. So it seems to be roughly, just as the pastimes roughly occur in the same sequence, more or less, with some variations, roughly, I would apply the same logic in terms of dhams. Roughly, they are manifest in the same sort of general area like that. Of course, here we have a specific Vrindavan Dham that Srila Prabhupada, he gives some quote in the Nectar Devotion that Vrindavan Vrajamandal refers to the area, diameter, whatever, like so-and-so miles, like south of Delhi, something like that. So there's a specific thing. Is it always in that specific area? Well, the Yamuna is always there. Obviously, the forests are always there. The surrounding geography outside of Vrajamandal may be a little bit different. Could be such a thing, but it seems to be like the general. It's not that you would find like, a hovalam in like, I don't know, the Himalayas or something like that. It seems to me, by applying that logic. So it's a little philosophical speculation, but yeah. Okay, Jita, you had something to add to that? Another point, just to sort of reinforce that, to give a more like logical basis of that, is that you see the culture, for example, in Vrindavan is North Indian culture. There's a different culture, for example, in South India. Constitutionally so. That's a spiritual thing. It's not that North Indian culture and South Indian culture are mundane things, but eternally that culture is there. So eternally, of course, what we call North India may be a little bit different depending on the kalpas, but eternally that situation is there, and eternally that culture exists around it. That's another thing. So it's not that Vrindavan will become manifest within South Indian culture like that. So.
Madurai said, Madurai.
Yeah.
Madurai is called the Mathura of South.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they have things like that. There's like an equivalent thing. Madurai is called Mathura.
I've heard that. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, there actually is a Vrindavan. But that's a little technical thing. Another thing is that it may depend on the incarnation or the specific dham itself. Obviously, for example, at least so I've heard like this, and it seems to be authoritative because I've heard from many people, many different classes, that the Prahlad Maharaj's pastimes we have here, it took place in Satya Yuga. And obviously that took place in the heavenly planets. We know that from Bhagavatam because it's described here that, he was occupying Indra's kingdom, Hiranyakashipu. So that took place in the heavenly planets. Simultaneously, we have Nirsimha Tirthas, and more in South India specifically, where they claim the temples, the pastime happened here. So the pastime can also happen in multiple places. Now, it gets a little complicated. What and where and which, I don't really know. But at least this thing of Vrindavan specifically, and also Lord Chaitanya, seems to be located to those two specific places. Nirsimha is a little more controversial. Srila Prabhupada, at least in one conversation, he doesn't have so much faith in that the tirthas of Ahovalam are bona fide. he expresses doubt on one thing. But Bhaktisiddhanta, he visited those places, so he seemed to affirm the authenticity of such things. So there's a little gray area for me, but just some things I want to mention. Yeah.
So, the body of the spiritual master, if you don't have transcendental vision, it remains, like, the spiritual master remains a mundane person to that.
To your vision, yeah.
Similarly, the deity is just made out of wood. If someone has...
He reciprocates with you like that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
In the true sense, these subject matters, spiritual master, deities, all transcendental, but if you have mundane vision, it's mundane. Similarly, the Dham, right? If you don't have, I mean, I'm kind of asking.
Yeah.
The Dham, if some materialist goes to Vrindavan, they just see some polluted place in the material world. So does it similarly to how the deity remains mundane to somebody? The same thing applies to the Dham, right?
Yeah, a very similar thing applies to the Dham. That if a special thing with the Dham, and the same thing with the deity. There's one verse. There's a song that sings like this: that then I shall actually be able to see Vrindavan when I acquire the mercy of Rupa Raghunath. So being able to see the Dham is incumbent more upon mercy. Of course, there is the philosophical understanding. We have the philosophical understanding, and that's important to be able to see that. That is what differentiates a devotee's vision, even neophyte devotee, from somebody who may be going to the Dham out of materialistic reasons. The Dham is never manifest to them. They don't get the same benefit. Similarly, for one who's seen the deity as stone or wood or like that, only is that, of course, the deity is stone and is wood in the sense that you have to take care of it in those. It's not that we're ignorant of that, but at the same time, we acknowledge there's more than that, and Krishna has personally entered into that form. So similarly, the same thing with the Dham. We understand that the Dham is is where Krishna conducted his pastimes. It's a transcendental abode. Now, still, we may understand that just like we may understand the deity is Krishna. We may not get realization of that necessarily. There's the philosophical understanding, the philosophical viewpoint, but that realization that comes through, obviously, mercy. Just as realizing the deity is not different from him, it requires a degree of mercy from the deity as well. So yeah, I will equate the two. It's quite similar, actually, because both are composed of material, they're manifest before our eyes of material elements. So
It's also said that if the deity is not being worshipped properly, then Krishna is not actually there, because Krishna is not obliged to appear in
yeah.
So, I mean, because Mataji was talking about the Dham, it can't be annihilated, but it may appear to be annihilated at some point. So I was just wondering, like, just how Krishna may not be present in the deity, the transcendental Vrindavan may not be present in the...
Yeah, well, at least in that specific case with the Dhams, because there's always devotees in this world until the end of, the golden age of Kali Yuga, actually, when the devotees, at least it's explained there, that there are no more devotees on the planet, and things start to deteriorate rapidly. So potentially at that time, the Dham could retract its spiritual potency. The physical location may still be there, but it may not be specifically, maybe covered over to such an extent that people can't even take advantage of the spiritual atmosphere there. Another thing is that the Dhams become, without getting into technicalities, they become contaminated by the sins of people going there and depositing their sins there. And they're purified by the saintly persons who go there and then purify the place. That's explained in Bhagavatam. So there's no saintly persons to go and purify the atmosphere of the Dham. If it's just sinful people going and going and going like that, then the atmosphere also becomes covered like that. So yeah, but generally, of course, there's so many devotees, at least nowadays. It's not so much the case with the Dhams itself. But in the future, with the advancement of Kali, it seems like it could also be such a case. So, okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay.